the button. All right, I think we're ready to begin. Hi, everyone. I want to introduce myself first. My name is Liz Barrett. I am a member of the Chicago chapter of Les Dames d'Escoffier. I am also the third vice president on the LDEI board. So webinars have been my jam for the last year, and we are very excited about this one today. Before I dive in, I want to just say a couple of little housekeeping notes. As you know, we are recording the webinar and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. I recommend going to the top right of your screen where it says view and switching to speaker view so that you have the image of whoever is speaking at the time on your screen. And you will also see the chat button at the bottom of your screen. And that's where we would like you to post any questions. I will be keeping an eye on that so that we make sure that everybody's questions get answered. And now let's get to the stars of the show. We've been very excited about this webinar because our topic, serving up solutions to hunger globally, locally, and regionally, has never been more relevant. The number of people affected by hunger globally rose to as many as 828 million people in 2021, which is an increase of 46 million people just in a year since 2020. And 150 million increase since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. And that's all according to a United Nations report that sadly shows that the world is sort of moving further away from ending hunger and food insecurity and malnutrition from its goal of 2030. So that's why, again, this topic is just so important for all of us to know about. Our panel of speakers today are going to share insights and real life stories about the growing issue of hunger, also referred to as food insecurity. So you'll hear those terms interchanged, I'm sure, and how it's being addressed around the world and in the United States. And we know you're going to leave inspired. So with that, let me introduce our panel of speakers. And I'm going to introduce each one, and then we'll go back and start with the first speaker. Chef Grace Ramirez. Grace, you want to give a wave there? She is based in New York. She works with the World Central Kitchen, helping provide meals to people in need during difficult times. In 2017, she got on the very first flight she could to Puerto Rico to help with Hurricane Maria relief efforts. And I'm sure you guys have seen the news. Puerto Rico is going to be in need again, based on the storm that is pounding that island again. Since 2017, she's become a regular part of the World Central Kitchen team, stepping up in big ways during the COVID pandemic to feed frontline workers in New York City. And this is only one aspect of her philanthropic work. She was born in Miami to a Venezuelan family, so Grace really works hard to bridge English and speaking audiences, focusing on Latin flavors and giving back to the community. She just got involved in a program called Wellness in the Schools to help school children eat better, more nutritionally, probably more regularly than many of them do. And she's going to talk about her experiences helping feed people in need with the World Central Kitchen, which, of course, founded by Chef Jose Andres, one of the most well-known global relief organizations. Next, we have Jennifer Bucko Lamplow. And Jen, give a little wave. Jennifer is Chief Impact Officer and Executive Chef for the Northern Illinois Food Bank, located in Geneva, Illinois, which is just outside Chicago. She's in charge of ensuring that hundreds of people in need receive the food that they need every single month. The Northern Illinois Food Bank serves people in 13 counties across Northern Illinois, bringing together food manufacturers, grocers, farmers, corporations, foundations, and individuals who donate their food, their funding, and their time to help meet the growing needs of people and families around Illinois. According to Jen's website, the Northern Illinois, it's estimated 1 of every 12 people in this 13-county region is facing hunger. And that's a 21% increase in hunger since the pandemic. Next, I'm going to introduce Dom's Maria Gomez Lawrence and Janet Burgess, give a little wave, from San Diego chapter. They are leading a really innovative and successful program just with their local chapter of a local, food drive to help people in their local community. And the board went to San Diego for a meeting in July. We were so inspired. I just thought they would be really great to share what one chapter is doing. So maybe more chapters want to replicate. And I think that concludes our introductions. And I'm going to start with Grace. So Grace, if you want to unmute yourself, and I just thought we'd start with the global perspective. So tell us how you got involved with the World Central Kitchen.
Well, I used to be a director producer who then became a chef. And I've always find that, it was the way I was brought up. My mom would say, I was that kid that my mom would be like, you're not getting 2 toys, you're getting 1, and we're going to donate the second one. And she would take me, so it was like ingrained in me to give back to the community. I think my mom always said, when you give, you find yourself, and in giving, you find God. So I think, whatever God you want to believe in, that's definitely felt really resonated with my heart. I think that I've come from a middle-class family in Venezuela where we had everything, we lost everything, we had everything, we lost everything. And I think that during very difficult times, it's very easy to just focus on your problems and your own belly button, and think that you have, that no one has it worse than you. And for me, doing these kind of work has always reminded me of how fortunate I am, but also is like, it is so important to give back to the community, because not only are you changing someone's lives, but you're changing your own life as well. And I think that, it kind of, I always wanted to be part of, I've always been involved with very different organizations, but I think when Jose went to Puerto Rico, I had read what he had done in Haiti, and then Puerto Rico felt very personal to me because my cousin is from Puerto Rico. I have family who lives in Puerto Rico. I live in New York, a couple of blocks from El Barrio. So it's part of my community. And I think that right when Maria hit, I had been through in Miami through Andrew, and half of my house got destroyed. When I saw those images, of our former president literally throwing bounty at people and kind of mocking the whole situation, I just left. And I was like, I don't know, I need to find Jose. I didn't have a lead back then. I was like, I'm gonna go find Jose Andres, and I'm gonna go help the community. And it was amazing. Like and funny enough, I was going through a very hard time. My grandmother had passed. I had gotten separated from my ex-husband, and it felt right. It felt like I needed to do that for the community and for myself. And I spent like a month there, making 2,500 meals a day, in the mountains and going around the island. And one of the most beautiful things that I found about the community in Puerto Rico is their resilience and the attitude towards things. That was really a life-changing lesson for me about how do you approach a disaster, because it takes a lot, it takes a toll on you when you're doing this kind of work. And they will be like, oh, we lost the roof, but we have water. We don't have water, but we have the river. It was always looking at the glass half full. And that they helped me get through this very difficult month of, hardly taking showers and just cooking, for 12 hours, getting bitten by mosquitoes everywhere. It was not a very, glamorous situation, obviously, but they kept me going, and they gave me the strength. And I was very grateful that in Puerto Rico, I got connected with World Central Kitchen. I've been that girl that I've showed up to Jose in his face and said, send me to Puerto Rico, send me to Venezuela, send me to the Bahamas, I want to help. And I think it's all been kind of, a very ongoing relationship of me being an ambassador for them and a volunteer and helping them lead a lot of other different operations. But that's how I got involved with them.
Wow, that's amazing. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in feeding some of those frontline workers in the early days of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's there's many funny stories. I think comedy is tragedy plus time, right? Like, um, I I've obviously now at this point I'm very close to the organization and I know what's happening. I mean, now we're a global organization. We're a chef relief team, and we just tackle as many disasters or unfortunate events, like Ukraine, like the Venezuelan and Colombian crisis, which I helped them set up that operation. But I think that with COVID, I was coming from Rwanda, from volunteering over there, teaching cooking classes in Rwanda, and I was like for 2 weeks I was without any kind of communication. It was very hard, and then I am in a layover in Qatar, and I see the news. There's this pandemic hitting. We don't know what's happening, and I was like, "Oof! I have a 12-hour layover in Qatar. I have no mask, and there's all these planes landing from all over the world. It's very likely that I will get this virus." So I did. So then I got to New York and I started feeling bad. And everyone's like, no, that can't be. Don't get tested. There's not enough tests. I was like, I need to get tested. I've been in Africa, layover in Qatar. And I went in and I told them my situation. I was like, I'm a chef. So they tested me and I tested positive. And it was very scary. Yeah, I had a very hard time with COVID that first time. But then the CMO of World Central Kitchen reached out and said, what are you doing? I was like, I'm at home with COVID. He goes, good, get it over with, because you have to go feed New York. So, and you know what? That gave me the strength. I was like, the city started shutting down. I quickly understood what that meant for a community of restaurants and our industry in general. So it kind of gave me the strength to snap out of it and find everything I could. Thank God I'm a chef, so I did all the things that I knew that my grandmother would say to do, to flush it out of my system as fast as I could. And then I was one of the first leads to lead this initiative, which we distributed 10 million meals across New York during the whole time that we were doing this operation. And at the height of it, yeah, I was supervising 100,000 meals a day, and obviously with an amazing team, but an amazing small mighty team. So it was a lot. But the thing that I was most proud of that was that we really took the time, me being the New Yorker that I am, I've been here 17 years, to identify, all these restaurants that are staples to our community, that if we lost them, it's literally like losing the Empire State Building for some of these communities. It's like, I cannot, I've celebrated my kids' birthdays there. I've celebrated so many special occasions. That's my neighborhood place. So we were able to identify 250 of these restaurants all over the 5 boroughs and really like hold their hand to be able to make food at scale and buy these meals from them and then distribute them to frontline workers in the community in need. And this was essential because, your community wants to eat what they want to eat, what they're accustomed to. And I think that that is the beauty of Jose's vision and World Central Kitchen, is like, it's not just throwing you a piece of sandwich and saying, eat this, you should be grateful. I think World Central Kitchen is very proud to really focus on culturally appropriate food and food that's going to nurture your soul, and that is not only going to fuel your body, but it's going to nurture your soul. And I think that was essential, because our frontline workers, they were eating, from their local Mexican, from their local Indian joint, from their local, Chinese spot. So it was kind of like a beautiful thing that we literally had their menu rotating so we could be able to accommodate, to help as many restaurants as we could, but also have all these people taste their local food.
That's so interesting, that perspective, that you really, because food is much more than just, filling a belly. It has that sort of more soul satisfying aspect, and that's a part of how World Kitchen operates, I think is brilliant. Can anyone get involved in working for World Central Kitchen locally? Do you have to be in the food or restaurant or industry?
No, I think anyone can volunteer, but again, it depends on the disaster. I think that we don't have at this point assigned, I wouldn't be able to tell you like a food bank, right? Like, go to this food bank and volunteer. It depends on where we're at. If you happen to be in Puerto Rico right now, most likely you can go volunteer with us. If you happen to be, so it depends, right? It depends on where we're at and what is needed. I think that, for example, during the height of COVID, we weren't accepting that many volunteers because at first we felt it was very dangerous. We didn't know what was going on. So we kept a very small, tight team because we wanted to keep people safe. And but now, now that everything's changed and the world kind of opened back up, it depends on, but I think you can go to wck.org and there's a volunteer, how to volunteer part there that they can tell you, different operations. And you know what? Also, I have a lot of people that just donate $5, that donate $10. That's a meal,
Yeah.
So, but I always say, really find out locally, like your food banks, like your local food bank, who needs help locally. Because I always say, like, you have to act locally and think globally as well. And that's super valid too, because you'll be surprised how much your community needs you.
Yeah, I love that perspective. We do have a great question from Sheila Cry asking, what kind of foods did you make in different parts of the world?
Jose is very particular about making culturally appropriate food that is relevant for wherever we are, right? So I remember, like, when we were in Venezuela, in the Venezuelan and Colombian border, that it was the height of the immigration crisis, of the refugee crisis there. We were making like arepas, pabellon, which is shredded beef and rice and beans and plantains. And there is a great story that I like to say. I was in the Bahamas, and I didn't know that when that hurricane, I think it was Dorian. I can't keep up now anymore with hurricanes. Now we're in Fiona, Puerto Rico, but Dorian, yeah. When Dorian hit the Bahamas, I didn't know that most of the people misplaced um, and hit the hardest were from Haitian descent. And it was a full stadium, filled with Haitians, refugees that were literally rescued from their homes and having been temporarily placed in a stadium. And Hossa said, we need to make Haiti's national dish. And I was like, okay, what does it entail? Well, he goes, it's fried pork, sweet plantain, fried plantains, and it's like a cabbage slaw. And I was like, okay, so we need to fry 200 pounds of pork. Like, I was like, Jose, I think we should make like a really delicious pasta and some, like spinach. And he was like, no, you are going to make that dish. And I mean, there was a beautiful Haitian chef that she was there, and she was like, this is how we're doing it, and it's double fried. You have to like fry it first, and then, I mean, we were cooking at the Atlantis, and the sprinklers, the fire alarm went off. Like, it was like a whole deal. And I was so upset. I was like, why are we making this dish? Like, this is crazy. And then I went to, I was, after being very upset, I was like, you know what? I need to follow Jose. He's our fearless leader. He knows what he's doing. And we made it. And, I went to serve that night out of that stadium, and people had not been eating that much, and they were feeling very sad. You felt the sadness and tension, and people just not even wanting to eat. And I was like, wow, I mean, but they're hungry, but they don't want to eat. But they were devastated, right? They had lost everything. They had lost their home. They left their home behind, and they're sleeping in a stadium. And that night we sold out, quote unquote, of our food in like 10 minutes. And people were crying and hugging us and saying, thank you for, making us feel like home for the night. And it was the dignity that came from that food, and the love and the care. They felt cared. They felt like we were listening. So I think it is very important. And I saw that you know, during the whole time that we were feeding New York, there were other organizations trying to do great work because, you know, they were really trying, but it was not culturally relevant food. It was not food that you wanted to eat, that you felt special. It was just kind of food. And I think that that's, it is very important, because if we don't make food that is culturally appropriate, and that is going to nurture, you know, fuel your body and nurture your soul, then we create another problem, because then there's food waste.
Mm.
And that's something that I saw, that it was heartbreaking to see in New York. People were just not eating the other food from other organizations, because it was just like, here's a sandwich, you know, here's this, or package, or something packaged that, you know, didn't feel good at all. So I think that that's something that we really care about in World Central Kitchen, and the work that I personally do myself.
Yeah, I think that that really sets World Central Kitchen apart. I think that cultural perspective, and I mean that's the most moving story about the fried pork. Even though, and I love that, you know, you were like, "What are we doing?" I want to ask you, do you? I'm sure, I think you do. Do you have a point of view on how hunger could be addressed differently, or maybe even solved over time?
Yeah, I have a very strong point of view, and this is why I'm so involved with like an organization like Wellness in the Schools, and the kind of work that I'm doing with Aramark. You know, right now in the fall, there's going to be, you know, 80 La Latina Cocina, Chef Grace Ramirez concepts all over universities around the country. And with Wellness in the Schools, helping them design more culturally relevant dishes, and, you know, people that you want to eat that, right? Because it feels like home to you. But I worked in New Zealand for 4 years, and I worked with an organization called, you know, it's like a garden to table program, right? Where we taught kids how to grow, harvest, and cook their own food. And I think that that is how we are going to solve a lot of problems. We need to education, like schools need to have these gardens where we're teaching kids how to grow, harvest, and cook their own food. I always say, let's bring back, quote unquote, the home economic program, but we need to teach kids how to make food that is going to nurture, you know, fuel their body, nurture their soul, and that they're able to, you know, it's like to me it's mind-boggling. Like, here we have in New York all these, you know, gardens around, but nobody's connecting the dots. And that's a lot of the work that I'm trying to do, is like, we need to start connecting the dots, and we need to, this is the only way things are going to change. Education, education, education. And it's not about, you know, having that one school that has an edible garden, and you looking at the tomato and saying, oh, that's beautiful, but you have no connection to it. If kids don't see the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I saw these children growing their own vegetables, growing a broccoli, they were eating it like it was candy, you know, that's
Yeah.
how happy they were. They saw the whole process. They were proud that they helped that broccoli grow. So they were taking ownership. They weren't wasting it. They were eating healthier, and they were going back to their houses, and, you know, wherever they were, and planting these kinds. So we were giving them seeds, and they were also, you know, planting peppers, planting herbs, or whatever they could. And I think that that is for me essential. If you really, you know, we need to start thinking about teaching people how to fish, literally, you know, in that aspect. So for me, that's why I'm so passionate about the educational space. And with Aramark, I've always said, you know, let's get gardens in these schools. We need to really make this connection, because if you have a little garden, you know, depends, obviously this is New York City, but it depends where you are. But you'll be surprised where you can grow, especially these days with technology, and with having a little, you know, even those vertical gardens that now you can have them really in your house. What you can grow.
I love that perspective. I think it's really inspirational. I think it's so true. I have to say, my neighbors are coming over for my carrot harvest on my deck this afternoon. I think we're going to get 6. So
It's very exciting. Yeah.
it's just a pot, but I'm like growing what I can. What do you, I think, tell us what you think, like, how can people help? I know you just talked about education. Do you have any other ideas? And we talked about like going to the, World Central Kitchen website, signing up as a volunteer. Are there any other thoughts you have on how people can get involved and help?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're going to now hear from so many different, perspectives of a local food bank, of a local chapter, and you will be surprised of what's available in your community. I think that another beautiful part of having been here in the city, helping feed New York, quote unquote, was knowing how many beautiful food banks, and I mean, and a food bank is, I say a beautiful food bank because the people normally that are taking care of a food bank, they're doing a phenomenal job. And, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this place existed near me. I didn't know that this other food bank was, 5 blocks from my house. And I think that, it's just a matter of wanting to do a little research and really figuring out and what resonates with your heart, because I think that, and don't, and start small. I think that the problem is with people trying to help, they have very ambitious goals and then they're like, oh, I cannot go do that. I cannot go get on a plane to Puerto Rico and be outside of my home for 2 weeks. You don't need to do that. You can have, start with one Sunday a month or one day a month where you're going out and taking your children. I think it's very important to take children to volunteer in these kinds of organizations, because it really changes your perspective and it makes you appreciate your community and what you have, but you're also able to understand really quickly what your community needs. So what are the needs in the community? And then something always leads to another where you're able to get involved in a larger scale or not, but it will make you feel really good, I promise.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe anything you told me. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we're going to move to Jennifer. Jennifer, you are in a leadership position with the Northern Illinois Food Bank. Tell us what you've seen in the last 2 years with the increase in people facing hunger and food insecurity.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Grace, for that beautiful segue to talking about food banking. Everything you said, I was like, well, we're done. Grace just said also thank you. It was beautiful. Food insecurity existed well before the pandemic. And I think when people think about hunger and food insecurity, and I know people use those terms interchangeably, hunger is a state that you're in the moment. It's lunchtime, I'm hungry right now. Food insecurity is an economic condition, right? It's, you don't have the ability to sustain the food you need each month. You don't have the economic means to do so, or the other resources. And that's what we define food insecurity as. And people were food insecure before the pandemic. I think what the pandemic did is it put more people into the state of food insecurity, because many of us are just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in serious need. And I think the pandemic really illuminated that across the country. And I think what else it did is it really made people understand what food insecurity meant. I think before the pandemic, when people who had never experienced food insecurity before became food insecure, realized that it's not just people experiencing homelessness. It's not just people who quote unquote won't get a job, right? These are myths kind of around food insecurity. Yes, there are folks who are experiencing that as well, but food insecurity is much broader. I would say probably 70% of the people that we serve in our network, in our 13 counties, have jobs. The true issue is underemployment. It's not just unemployment, but underemployment. People are not making enough to make ends meet. And so we saw that when all of these businesses closed during the pandemic and people were thrown into this 1 or 2 paychecks away, the need rose exponentially. And then what happened is the pandemic started to wane a little bit, and then we hit this economic uncertainty and people didn't have time to recover. And so we're seeing now, we're serving numbers that we saw at the height of the pandemic. We're serving around 400,000 individuals monthly. And so it's that number pre-pandemic, it was about 250 to 300,000, depending on kind of the time of the year and what was happening. So pre-pandemic, it was like our average was probably like 286,000 people monthly. And these last probably since March, it's been well over 400,000. At the height of the pandemic, it was about 500,000. So we're getting back up there. And what's hard now too for us is that the food supply chain is so disrupted and food is so expensive that the need is going up and we don't have enough food to meet the need. We have all these amazing new donors who, when they understood about food insecurity, became donors to our food bank to really help us. And we have this money, but we don't necessarily have the food. And this is something very new to us because we know how much food, we're all food people. We know how much food is wasted in this country. And we know that there's usually enough food. And the food is there, but it might be too expensive, or there's this, all this disruption. There's all these, climate events that are causing some of our food to be disrupted. There's avian flu. All of this is sort of this perfect storm right now where the need is going up and the food is going down. And it's been a very difficult thing to manage to make sure we're getting our families enough food.
How are you guys managing? I mean, it sounds like you've had some generous financial donors.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about how you're managing that gap.
Yeah. And we have many generous food donors still too. We're still getting some really great donated food. It's just some of the food is harder to get, meat, especially meat protein. I loved, Grace, I think we were talking maybe before this where you're talking about beans, again, about getting people to eat more beans. Beans are this great source of protein, but meat protein is there's a lot of disruption right now. That industry was one of the hardest hit by COVID. Because there's really only sort of 4 main meat manufacturers in this country. And then they have all these, sort of sub distributors and sub businesses. But that industry got hit really hard. So meat was very difficult to get during the pandemic. They're recovering, but the cost is so high right now that it's making it really hard to get meat protein. And so we're trying to do, some really interesting things with, vegetable proteins and, the beans and nuts and things like that. But there's still this disruption. So we're working really hard to see what we can do to get the meat protein that we need. We have some amazing, food donors too, but those industries have all been hit really hard by COVID. And so they're trying to recover too. And so where we would, normally get, if you think about USDA grades of food, like the grocery store has the grade A apples, right? So we would maybe get the B's or the C's. Because there's so much disruption, the grocery stores are now getting sort of the B's and the C's. And so it's like, well, what can we get? So it's this very interesting competition kind of almost with the retailers because they have to supply their shelves too. And so it's been a little bit of a dance, but I will say that the sort of, if you're measuring it in sort of we measure in pounds here when we're talking about the food, when you're measuring sort of pounds per household, that poundage over the last couple of years has gone down just because we don't have the volume. We had a lot of government support at the height of the pandemic, and that food from the government has also gone down just because of all of this sort of competition and disruption. And so it's just that everything is just down, down, down. What's gone up is our purchased food. So we have to purchase way more food than we ever did before because we just don't have it to donate and the government doesn't have it to give to us.
I'm wondering, can we talk a little bit about, Lori Tietzen put an interesting statement in here saying, I work part-time in my local food pantry and our customer counts are up about 40%. And Lori, I think you live in Colorado. I think Lori lives in Colorado. Higher than during COVID. The costs are much higher and federal funding is down. We are now really focusing on food waste. And then Deb said the selling of less than perfect food to consumers has become a new major business.
Yeah.
So can you talk just a little bit about trying to alleviate food waste? I had a woman in my neighborhood Facebook group said she was just sick seeing at what was getting thrown out from, the Starbucks near her house or whatever. And I know there's so many challenges with what's safe or permissible to give away.
Sure. Well, the business of food banking is alleviating food waste. We're keeping perfectly good food from going into the dumpster. That's the basis of food banking since food banking started in the 80s. And so as a business, that's what we do. We are a charity that our mission is to have enough food for people to thrive in their lives. And the people we serve, we call them our neighbors. So our neighbors who we're helping, that's always been our goal is to take this perfectly good food and make sure it gets to the people in need. And so we always focus on food waste. One of our biggest goals, we are very goal metric driven here, and trash waste is one of our biggest goals. And how do we make sure that we're operationally efficient enough when that food comes to us, that it gets in and it gets out. And so we have a really great program with our retailers called Direct Connect. And so we connect our food pantry. So food banking is like, think of us as the food distributor, right? And then our stores are our food pantries and soup kitchens and shelters. Sometimes people use food banks and food pantries interchangeably. So we get the food out to our food pantries. We do have direct distribution models too here that we do. But we have this program where we connect our food pantries directly with retailers so they can go right there and pick up the food instead of it coming to us processing it going out to the food pantries. We're talking shelf life in this arena is like the golden ticket. So the quicker you can get that food out, the better, right? So we're doing, probably 20, we said pounds, but we also we have an equivalent to meals. So we take the pounds, we divide it by 1.2 because USDA says the average meal is 1.2 pounds. And so then we say this is how many meals of the equivalent. So we're probably 20 to 25 million meals a year is directly through this Direct Connect program. So that food is getting out faster. So it's been a really great way to alleviate food that might have ended up in the dumpster.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure that's the case with like dairy products and, milk and eggs.
Produce, especially the shelf life on produce. I mean, you all know, you've bought your produce, stuck it in your produce drawer, and you go to cook it 5 days later and you're like, my celery's mushy, like we have that shelf life issue, especially with produce, with dairy, and people are very confused about use by, sell by, best by dates. It's a very confusing process. And so sometimes the things that we distribute, the date might have passed, but it's a best by date. Like you can still eat food after the best by date. This is one of the reasons we have such a food waste problem is the confusion around these dates. So we do a lot of education, speaking of education, we do a lot of education around helping the food pantries understand so they can help their neighbors that they're serving understand, like, this is still okay to eat. Like, just because your milk expired today, it doesn't mean that you have to throw it out. Like if you smell it and it's okay, like you can still drink that milk, right? Or same with eggs so, so much of it is just understanding those dates.
Yeah, that's a really great point about the education about what those dates, because it drives me bananas when I see.
It's very confusing.
Yeah. Me, I'm proud to drink my expired milk as long as it doesn't smell.
Exactly.
Jen, do you have a perspective on how hunger can be alleviated or better addressed on a regional level or even a national level?
Yeah, I have a couple. I talked about underemployment. I think that's, I can't remember who said the saying about, why are we, fishing people out of the end of the stream? Why don't we keep them from falling in at the head of the stream? I can't remember the saying, but really underemployment is that keeping people out of the stream, right? Like getting people a living wage, giving them benefits, giving them childcare. These things are all serious issues that make it really hard for people to either make enough money or to sustain employment. So that's sort of a big problem, right? An immediate way to solve some of the hunger is we're here. The food bank is here, and I did talk about we have less food, but we still have food. And there's all these food banks and all these food pantries and all of these programs and federal benefits like SNAP and WIC and free and reduced lunch. There are all these ways to help people get food. But about the last statistic I read in the United States, the number of food insecure people was somewhere around 40 million, 38 to 40 million. And of those 40 million people nationally who are food insecure, only like 60% of them are not using charitable food. They're not going to food pantries. They're not going to food banks. They're not using charitable food. And about 45% of them are not using public benefits. So they're not getting SNAP, which used to be called food stamps. It's called something different in every state. In Illinois, it's a debit card called the Link card, and it's money for groceries. So there's this huge portion of folks who are not using the resources out there. And so for us, it's beholden to us to make sure we help people understand what's out there for them. Talk about education, right? Like helping them to understand they either don't know it's there. There's a couple of reasons why people don't come. They don't know it exists. Grace said she didn't know her food bank was down 4 blocks down from her house, right? Like so many people, if you're not part of if you don't understand the food insecure world, like you don't know that it exists, right? I always tell the story. I started out, I was teaching culinary arts, before I was in food banking, and I taught in Chicago, and I had students who were coming to me to learn culinary arts who knew nothing about food. And we're all food people. We know this is not an easy business, right? If you don't love it and you're not passionate about it, like it is not an easy business. So I was so curious as to why these students were coming into culinary arts. They didn't know the difference between broccoli and celery. And so I finally asked one of my students, and he said, well, it's because I knew I would eat. And it was like a wave came over me of like, oh, this is a whole, like, I have to dial my brain back. Like I'm not talking about fine dining here. I'm talking about like sustaining life now, like thriving, right? So it was like my goal to teach that kid how to cook. And then I started seeing all the other kids. They were adults at that point, but you know what I mean? College students. But I started seeing all these college students. I'm like, oh, they knew that they would eat. And that opened my eyes to food insecurity and kind of how I ended up here.
Wow.
But sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but it's really helping people understand. Yeah, it's helping people understand food insecurity, and then helping people understand the resources are there. We have all of these resources in place. And what we've begun to understand as a food bank is that not everybody's going to go to a food pantry. They don't want to go because there's stigma, right? They feel maybe ashamed. They don't want to go because the food pantry is open once a week on Tuesday morning at 10. I don't know about you all, but I'm at work at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, right? Or there's some other reason, like, there's a lot of food insecurity in the LGBTQ plus community. And many of our food pantries are in religious institutions, and there's a conflict there where they might be afraid they're not going to be welcomed, and so there's things like that exist. And so as a food bank network, we have started to understand that we have to start offering different options of access to folks, right? Like the food pantries they probably do 80% of the food that we give out. 20% of the food we do are in these other programs, right? And so we have to meet people where they're at, right? And so we've decided that, we need home delivery. We need to help people. If I'm a single mom with 6 kids, I'm not dragging them to the food pantry and waiting for an hour and then dragging them through, right? Like I can't make that happen. And so we're starting to broaden our access. So we have an online food pantry. We have a brick and mortar food pantry. You can drive up, you can shop, you can get a delivery. And we're starting to spread this out through our network so that the 60% of people who aren't coming now maybe have a chance to come and to get that food, right?
Well, and a lot of them might be seniors who have like mobility issues.
Right.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Looking through the chat here, Lori noted the only federally mandated expiration date is on baby formula.
Exactly.
So there's a bill in Congress on regulating labels. So that's really good to know.
Yeah.
And she said food waste is the #1 item in landfills. 40% is from households. Try to compost. Yeah. So, all that we don't give to our local farmers.
Yes.
Kathy Gold noted Desmond Tutu's quote. I think we need to stop just pulling people out of the stream. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I botched that quote. It's a beautiful quote, and it's so true, right? Like that's part of the problem, and that's gonna eventually solve it. But the need is now, right? So what do we do now for the people who are food insecure today? And we need to get them to our programs and get them the resources they need. And a lot of it's just education, but a lot of it is also making it accessible for them and meeting them where they're at. We used to always measure our success as a food bank in pounds, like how many pounds did we distribute this year? And now we measure pounds and people. How many neighbors are we meeting this year? Are we meeting the people in marginalized communities where they don't have access? Are we meeting people, in a way that helps them thrive in their life? Like being open at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning doesn't work for everybody, right? Like how can we get them the food that they need to thrive?
Yeah, really good thinking. I'm just going to share a thought that Bonnie Henry put into the chat, saying she chairs the board for our local pantry in Salem, Massachusetts, which is an agency of the Greater Boston Food Bank in Boston. We've been rapidly expanding our direct to farms food gathering. We're also the main recipient of the city's community garden. This is a great opportunity for our local DOMs to participate. We partner with a local culinary program for disadvantaged youth for prepared meals to distribute at our pantry's mobile farmers market. DOMs in the New England chapter are supporting both organizations, which is amazing.
Phenomenal.
So with that, speaking of local chapters, I'm going to move over to the dynamic duo of Maria Gomez Lawrence and Janet Burgess from San Diego. you all in San Diego started a food drive just this year. So I'd love for you to tell us why you started it and how you're running it. How does it operate?
So I'll tell you how we started. We were putting our agenda together, our calendar together for the year. And we always have these fantastic educational events all surrounded by food. And it was right after conference through the holidays that you see signs for food drives everywhere. And it just dawned on me, I'm like, why is it that I only see this during the holidays? Everybody tells you about a food drive during the holidays. I'm like, what about the rest of the year? So I started digging into what's happening in my city, because as Grace said earlier, start small, right? You want to help. You got to start within your circle, your city. And in San Diego, we have 3.2 million residents, and 450,000 people face hunger every day. It's about 31% of this city. It is probably higher now when this letter came out to our chapter. So I brought it to the board and they embraced it. And we do 4 food drives a year, and we skip the holidays on purpose. We have months, we stop in October and then we start again at the beginning of the year.
Amazing. And let's get even into some more of the nitty gritty. Janet, do you want to explain sort of how you guys organized it and rallied your chapter members to participate?
Yes, well, we notify people, of course, by email, our annual meeting, and also by letter. Maria ordered bags, blue bags, Ladom blue bags, and we mailed 40 bags to each Dom in our city, 10 bags to be filled for each food drive. We tried to make it really clear with subsequent emails, and some of them still didn't get it. So the first one, we collected probably, I'd say 600 to 800 pounds of food in January. And we thought this is very successful. We had designated certain smaller food banks that would be the recipient of our food, synagogues, churches, the community resource center. So as time went on and the DOMs we didn't hear about or hear from, or who expressed confusion, we said, if one of your excuses about not participating, which we made mandatory this year as part of being a DOM in San Diego, we said, if you can't shop and fill bags and bring them to some convenient place where we can meet you or pick up your food, you can send us a check for $50 a quarter and we'll shop for you. So Maria has become the recipient of the $50 or $100, whatever she may get, and the shopping queen before we do our food drive. So that's kind of the nitty gritty of how it ended up being. These women got these 40 bags. Some of them we've never seen a bag since then, only cash. Some of the DOMs didn't give us 10 bags of food or cash, and we haven't heard from them in a year. Needless to say, they haven't paid their dues, and they're no longer going to be in our chapter. But that's sort of the nitty gritty of what we've done, the physical part, designating the charity, physically bringing the food there in trucks. One of the places I went, I showed up in the alley. They claimed that they didn't know anything about what we were doing and told me to leave my food donation on a little table, like a card table. And I said, no, we have truckloads of food coming in, the SUVs with trucks, people with loads of food. And I think they were rather shocked because this wasn't told to them by the director of the food program. So that's sort of what we've done. And we purposely have avoided large food banks to gather food. It's been the smaller ones because my thought always, ever since I grew up, was if you act locally, you can think globally. Take care of your neighborhood, take care of your street, your family, your friends, and go from there.
Amazing.
You know, another thing, another thing, and I'm sorry to jump in, another thing that we've done and is really try to educate our community about our chapter. So one of the first ideas was to go to the app Nextdoor, which we all have in our neighborhoods, and talk about the association and talk about the food drive and put dates in it. And you have no idea how much food I have collected from people that were just so amazingly embracing the idea of helping us, but helping the community.
Now, wait
And
a minute. I don't know what Nextdoor is. Is that
okay, so in San Diego, there's an app that's Nextdoor, and it's within your neighborhood. You know, like 2 miles or 3 miles. So people say, "Hey, there was a coyote. Oh my God, somebody tried to break into my car," or we communicate with each other. So I wrote this beautiful letter. I told them who we were as an association, put our international website, our local website. And I said, hey, by the way, we're doing a food drive this year. If you want to join, please send me an email. We'll make a date and I'll come by and pick up the food. And my husband and I drove around the whole community and we just, people came together. It's pretty amazing.
wow. So that's like the equivalent of like your neighborhood Facebook page, which those are really popular in Chicago. So you're getting donations from people who are not even Dom. So you're getting participation on a wider level, which I think is amazing. What are some of your key learnings and tips that you could share with other Doms that are on this call in case they might want to mount a similar campaign in their own chapter?
Well, I think first is, put a structure together for your food drive. Find the locations of where you are going to be donating the food. Make it easy for your chapter by having different drop-offs, or in the case of send me a check, I'll go shopping for you. Understanding what's important to go shopping for. And for those DOMs that are going to donate food, just be very honest and say, look at the dates, talk about dates. I understand best time to buy when it's expired. But when it's 2013 and 2012, that should not be part of your donation. So it's understanding that you're doing something to help somebody in need, but that doesn't mean that we're cleaning out your pantry. And, we had a situation where somebody did that to us and Janet had no issue picking up the phone and say, can you come back and pick up your donation? This is not a donation. This is, things that you should have thrown away. And that person came back with with more bags of food. And it wasn't to be rude. It's really a reality check. We're, as a chapter, we've done a lot of fundraising for scholarships, mentoring programs. This is the equivalent to that. We've been involved with green tables as well. So it's educating and also finding out where you're donating your food. We donated to my local synagogue. The rabbi was amazing. He goes, bring me 1 can of corn because that can of corn is going to make the difference in somebody's life. So thinking small. And then we found another fantastic place that started in a little trailer. They still the little trailer. They were feeding, 200 families a month. Now they feed 1,000 families a week.
Wow.
And it's amazing. And it's in this little tiny, area of a neighborhood. But you see how, at least within my neighborhood, people are really wanting to help. Just tell you one more quick story that really inspired me that this should be a mission, hopefully for a lot of people. I went grocery shopping, and as I was on my way out with my groceries, there was a woman in front of me that, had shopped so much food, paid for the food, and I was behind her. So I walked out and she left the cart outside and she put free food, take it all. And I tell you, that really hit me of how many people out there want to make a difference in their community without getting their names attached, Mm-hmm. So I think there's just a lot of great people that are willing to help. They don't know how to help. And since we have these fantastic chapters, and at least I think the San Diego chapter is wonderful, I wanted to embrace that. We wanted to embrace that.
I love it. We had a question from Susie Gott Segure. Les Dames Blue Bags, can you elaborate? Was it just like you went to a promotional thing and got like a shopping bag, or?
I went to Amazon and I found a blue bag that was not expensive at all, very sturdy bags. But we wanted to call it the blue bag donation because that's the color of the association. So we have these great photos with a rabbi, like 1,000,000 pounds of food, and then the other, community center, and then we just did another food bank. And it's this thing that you take photos, and all the blue bags are our food. So we're so proud of it, you know.
You're not worried about, you don't worry with getting them logoed or anything. You just got a
Oh, no.
color shopping bag. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
about the color.
Paula Zulsdorf has a question. Where does the donated food come from? Does each Dom get creative with who to get donations from? It sounds like to me that the Doms are going to the supermarket and spending their own money and filling the bags.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, we had the idea of the next door, which we all have it in San Diego. As your neighbors, as your friends. I mean, are you kidding me? My father-in-law donates, my brother-in-law donates, my neighbors donate, people I don't know donate. You just ask, people are willing to help. So, and the Doms, if they can go shopping, will go shopping. But the Doms will go shopping themselves and bring, you know, Janet gets a lot of donations from some of our Doms that, you know, bring these fantastic bags of food. And, you know, we ask for 10 bags per quarter per Dom.
Yeah.
That's really, you know, to make a difference. And, you know, we're a small chapter, but I believe we're mighty, you know,
And
we're
is
very
it
proud.
non-perishable? Is it like dry goods and canned goods and?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you know what's happening now, which is very interesting. I go shopping where I can really stretch the dollar that I get from every Dom, you know. And I happen to be at a local store in San Diego, and I think it's just a California chain. And one of the owners, they're like franchises. She goes, "Oh my God, you're buying so much food. You must have so many children." And I go, "Yeah, about 31% of San Diego, but that's besides the point." I told her about it. She goes, "Do me a favor, send me a letter. I want to make a donation." So, you know, so it's pretty amazing how doors can just open and it can become bigger than what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Doors, hearts, and wallets. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I see Jen posted, we're almost at our end here. Jen, you posted a comment that you wanted to also mention. Do you just want to pipe up that to Grace?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I just, you know, as we talk about, you know, meeting our neighbors where they're at, you know, to Grace's point, we're really trying to focus on providing more culturally affirming foods, medically tailored foods, because we believe that's also a barrier to people not coming to charitable food or using our network. And my one other quick point is it is Hunger Action Month. September is Hunger Action Month. This Friday, the 23rd, is Go Orange for Hunger Day. So if you can wear orange and post on your social media and use the Hunger Action Month hashtag, that would be super great to bring awareness.
I'm totally doing it.
Thank you.
That's great.
Does anybody else have any last questions before we end? I just wanted to throw that out there. We've got such a good chat that I'm going to save it. A lot of people volunteering with Meals on Wheels and different experiences they're having, which I get like, I'm getting goosebumps because I feel like everybody on this call is so inspired and already doing so many great things. So as I mentioned, we are recording this and we will be posting it on YouTube for anybody who couldn't participate. And I just want to send such a big thank you out to Chef Grace Ramirez and Jennifer Lamplow and Janet Burgess and you, Maria Gomez-Lawrence, who just, you know, you brought the thunder today. And I think you've inspired everybody with your experiences and your insights. And we are so grateful to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.